this account of some man who was writing about preaching, and he said, if the preacher hasn't gotten to the Bible in the first 5 minutes, then I just tune him out and I just start reading the Bible for myself. I thought, well, okay, that's pretty good. I kind of like that, but and then it makes me stop and think, okay, make sure I get to the Bible. Make sure I get to the Bible.
Yeah, exactly.
But please don't tune out. We're going to talk about Bible things. We're going to be in Acts chapter 17 as we go on.
Is that one turned on?
I don't know. It's got a blue light.
Yep, we're good.
It says it's or a purple light, or it says it's on.
Yep, we're good.
Okay. In Acts chapter 17, Paul's in the city of Athens, and he preaches Jesus in the city of Athens, and I thought it was kind of interesting. I was looking up and reading about this, and the city of Athens is kind of an astounding place. This is an overview of the city of Athens, and Herman, did y'all get to go there? Y'all, yeah, Herman and Carol got to go there years ago, and this is Mars. I mean, this is the Acropolis here. This whole thing, and it's you can see how the city was built up and around the city of Athens. The city of Athens is built up around this. The city of Athens has been continuously inhabited for over 3,000 years. Some historians put it over 5,000 years. Now, how long has Granbury been here?
200?
Can you imagine this same city inhabited for over 3,000 years? Athens was the home of Western culture and many intellectual figures. You may know of these people or heard of some of them. Sophocles, Euripides, Aristophanes, the physician, Hippocrates, Hippocrates, the philosopher. I always say Socrates because that's just what it looks. It's Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, the historians Herodotus, Thucydides, and Xenophon, and then the statesman Pericles. If you go back in history and you look up, you'll see these names mentioned over and over and over again by so many people as they're a basis, a standard, if you will, a building ground for Western culture and intellectual thought and ideas. The ideas of Socrates and Plato and Aristotle are still used even to this day. Athens was a great city. It truly was a great city. And so many things have come from the city of Athens. When we look at the city of Athens here, it just wiped it out. This is the entirety of Mars Hill here. This is the Acropolis is on top. The Parthenon's on top. And boy, it just crunched all this is going to be interesting now because it crunched the font, and it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen with the rest of the lesson here. But this is the Parthenon on top up here, and the temple to Athena is what this is, and the Parthenon it was about 228 feet by 101 feet. It's a football field is 300 feet long from goal line to goal line. A football field is 300 feet long. And so this is 228 feet by 1. If you look and you can see some of the people standing right here. Someone's sitting right here in front of this pillar. These columns are 6.2 feet in diameter and 34 feet tall. This was just an outrageously large, huge, ginormous temple to Athena, as the Greeks worshipped their goddess Athena. We look at this is actually the Areopagus. This is Mars Hill here. This is where Paul is going to go preach Jesus right here. This is where it is. And this marker over here says this is probably or near the site where Paul was actually doing his preaching. It's just an outcropping of rock. And this is where justice was meted out. This is where they stopped and they talked about things and they decided things. And this is where Paul is preaching here in Acts chapter 17. The very spot. This is the city of Athens. We go back and we look at history. In his knowledge, John Ellis wrote a history book about various things and the knowledge of divine things from revelation, not from reason or nature. And then the title goes on. I just dotted it after that. The title goes on and on. And this is what he wrote about the city of Athens. He said here, it was the custom of the Greeks, says Maximus Tyrus, to worship the gods in the purest matter, of human shape and of the most exquisite art. They increased to so excessive a number, the number of gods in Athens, that Athens was called the country and shop of the gods. And you wonder why Paul was provoked in his heart. We go on and we continue reading. And Xenophon complained that they had made the whole city but one altar. Cicero calls it a city crammed with temples. And one in Petronius observed, our country is so filled with deities that you may easier find a god than a man. Oh, dear. That's how crowded it was. And that's what the people of the day said of it, of the city of Athens. Our country is so filled with deities that you may easier find a god than a man. And it was truly the pantheon of the world, having one temple in common to all the gods. Hence the oracle might well call Athens the common altar of Greece. And it goes on. This is how given over to idols the city was. The people were. And this had gone on for centuries. As we look back at Aristotle and Plato and Socrates, and how it had just increased and grown and built and became grander and more great. And these temples were built and all the worship and the practice that was done. And then when you read in Acts chapter 17 how Paul was provoked, you kind of get an idea. Crunched it all up. Title of the lesson, God is not an idol. I wonder why it did that. Of all things to crunch up, it crunched up the title. Okay. God is not an idol. I want you to kind of remember that. God is not an idol. In Acts chapter 17, we can read about Paul's visit to Athens. Look at, starting in verse 14. Remember, Paul was at Berea here. Then immediately the brethren sent Paul away to go to the sea. But both Silas and Timothy remained there. So those who conducted Paul brought him to Athens, and receiving a command for Silas and Timothy to come to him with all speed, they departed. Then while Paul waited for them at Athens, his spirit was provoked within him when he saw that the city was given over to idols. Therefore he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and with the Gentile worshippers, and in the marketplace daily with those who happened to be there. Then certain Epicurean and Stoic philosophers encountered him, and some said, what does this babbler want to say? Others said, he seems to be a proclaimer of foreign gods, because he preached to them Jesus and the resurrection. And they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, may we know what this new doctrine is of which you speak. For you are bringing some strange things to our ears. Therefore we want to know what these things mean. For all the Athenians and the foreigners who were there spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear some new thing. And we see Paul is provoked, and he's preaching Jesus to them. Now some historians, some secular commentaries, they talk about maybe they thought that Paul was preaching to them about two new gods. The first name of this new God was Jesus, and the second name of this new God was the resurrection. It's two new things. We've got to learn about these things. We've got to hear about these things. And they asked him to speak to them about this because they wanted to know. They didn't hear, they'd never heard of this thing before, these things before, and they wanted to hear, they wanted to know. Paul begins to preach. He begins to preach to them the thing that they needed. Paul spoke to them about Jesus and the resurrection. He spoke to them the things of the gospel of Jesus Christ. These are the things that they needed to hear. The city's given over to idolatry, and they need to hear about true worship to God, not another idol or two more idols. Paul takes the occasion to find or brings up the idol that they have to the unknown God, and he says, that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to preach to you Jesus about this unknown God. You don't even know who this God is, and I'm going to put a face to him. I'm going to put a name to him. I'm going to put a practice, a belief, a doctrine to this idol that you have, and it's just there. I'm going to let you know. And Paul begins to preach Jesus Christ. Now, the people of the city, they were very religious, and Paul identifies that. You go down and you look at verse 22, then Paul stood in the midst of the Areopagus and said, Men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are very religious. And this applies to so many people today. People are religious. But oftentimes they're religious about the wrong things and in the wrong attitude, with the wrong thoughts, the wrong purposes behind their religious thought, their religious ideas. And what we have to do is we have to strive to teach God. Now, it's not going to do us any good to teach God if we're not striving for God ourselves in our daily lives. If Paul was an idolater, it would do him no good to talk about the one true God, because he would be an idolater and he would be recognized as that. No, we have to look at ourselves. We have to give ourselves a good hard examination. Am I really striving for the things of the gospel every day? Am I striving to be a Christian example every day? Is it just on Sunday? Or is it just when my other Christian friends are around? Or is it something that I try to do every single day to the very best of my ability? Yeah, we all have our hang-ups. We sin from time to time. We try not to, but we might sin from time to time anyway. We've got to be careful and cautious and look at ourselves and examine ourselves and make the corrections that are necessary if we're going to preach Jesus Christ and Him crucified. If we're going to do the same thing that Paul did. We have to recognize that people are religious. Paul recognized that. People are religious. But what we do is we strive to teach the simple doctrine of Jesus Christ, bringing them to that understanding and away from whatever religious beliefs they have at this particular time. What we can see of these people, we already know of the Apostle Paul. We go back and we look in Acts chapter 22. Keep your finger in Acts chapter 17. Go over to Acts chapter 22. Acts chapter 22, verses 3 and 4. And Paul writes there, or Paul says there, I persecuted this way to the death, binding and delivering into prisons both men and women. And also the high priest bears witness, and all the council and the elders, from whom I also received letters to the brethren, and went to Damascus to bring in chains even those who were there in Jerusalem to be punished. We look at Acts chapter 26 and verse 9. What was his attitude during all of this? Acts chapter 26 and verse 9. Indeed, I thought myself, I thought I must do many things contrary to the name of Jesus of Nazareth. He had lived in all good conscience even to that day. In fact, and what he's saying is, even while I was persecuting the church, even while I was doing things religiously that were wrong in God's sight, I thought I was doing the right thing. So Paul, when he talks about the people being very religious, I see you, they were very religious, he can talk about that because he thought he was doing the right thing, but he needed instruction, he needed correction. And that's what he's striving to bring to the people of Athens. As they're given over to idols, as they're given over to idolatry, he wants to point them in the correct path. So many people today are given over to idolatry. We can be guilty of that too. We have to make sure that we're not given over to worshiping the things of this earth, the ideas of this earth, the ideas of man, and putting God secondary to those things. All too often and all too easily it can happen. The people, the philosophers, the thinkers, the general population, they thought they were worshiping correctly. That's what they had known generation after generation after generation. This is the way we've always done it. This is the way we worship the gods, because they thought that there was a variety of gods. This is the way we've always done it. And Paul's going to speak to them concerning the one true God, the God that actually exists. They needed to hear, and today people need to hear the truth about God and simply what is true worship to Him. It's the same thing people need to hear today. There are numerous people who offer their kind of worship to God. But they are no different than the people of Athens. In the city of Athens, they need to hear the truth from God. If you go around Hood County today, there are vast numbers of people who are offering their worship to God. Is it according to God's word? Or is it according to the thoughts and the ideas of man? Their religious belief, their religious affiliation. Are they serving God according to God's pattern or according to man's pattern? And we need to have the courage and the strength to stand up and hold to God's pattern. All too often we're told or it's suggested that we keep our religious beliefs to what are the two things that you're never supposed to talk about in polite company? Politics and religion. You're not supposed to talk about those two things. Well, we have to have the courage to talk about religion. I don't really care about politics. I do. I'm very adamant about politics. But I'm more concerned about religion.
Amen.
I'm more concerned about our stance with God. Are we striving to serve Him? People need to hear the truth. They're not going to understand the truth. They're not going to know the truth if we're not striving to practice the truth ourselves. They're going to see the hypocrisy in us. And so we need to get rid of our own hypocrisy and then simply strive for the truth of God's word. In Acts chapter 7, when Stephen is preaching in Acts chapter 7, he points out the hypocrisy. He points out and talks about the things that the council needed to hear. They didn't like it. And they ended up taking him out and stoning him. Stephen didn't modify his teaching. He taught the simple truth of the gospel. We don't need to modify our teaching. We need to talk about the things that the hearers need to hear. We need to have the strength and the courage to do that, to stand up and speak about the gospel of Jesus Christ. In Acts chapter 24, verses 24 and 25, Paul reasoned with Felix, and he reasoned with about those things that Felix needed to hear. We look at Acts chapter 24, verses 24 and 25. And after some days, when Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, he sent for Paul and heard him concerning the faith in Christ. Now, as he reasoned about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and answered, "Go away for now, and when I have a convenient time, I will call for you." You see, this is what Paul reasoned with Felix about. And this is the same things that we need to reason about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come. That's a real big fancy way of saying that Paul reasoned with Felix about what? The gospel. Because the gospel is about righteousness. The gospel is about self-control. Are we going to bring ourselves under control to God or control to man? The gospel is about the judgment to come. Because we will all bow down. We will all bend our knee in submission to God's will. When we look at Paul, when we look at his teaching, he began by confronting their beliefs. Go back over to Acts chapter 17. Paul began by confronting the beliefs of the people. The Stoics believed that the earth was self-existing and existed in a recurrent life cycle. And in other words, when the earth would eventually the earth would blow up and be consumed, and they believed that fire was the existent thing, and then this fire of consumption would cause a rebirth again, another life cycle. The Stoics believed this type of thought. The Greeks also believed that they were superior to other nations and peoples. And in Acts chapter 17, verse 24, Paul says, God who made the world and everything in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is he worshipped with men's hands, as though he needed anything, since he gives life to all and breath in all things. And he has made from one every nation of men to dwell on the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings. Paul's confronting their beliefs. God created. We go back and we look at Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We go back and we read the history of mankind. God created the heavens and the earth. And he created everyone from one. Every one of us here have 4 common ancestors. Every one of us here have 4 common ancestors. Adam and Eve, and Noah and his wife. Every one of us, all mankind, has these same 4 common ancestors. All of us do. God made from one, everybody. The Greeks thought that they were better than everybody else. Their wisdom, their study, their education, their culture, they thought they were better than everybody else. We have to be careful and cautious about thinking ourselves to be better than other people. Because we're all people. We all have our own little issues, our own little problems. We have our own little idiosyncrasies. I always mispronounce that word. We're all people. Cut us and we all bleed blood. Yeah, there's different types of blood. But it's the A, the B, the O, the A, B, but it's blood. It's blood. We get too caught up in hair color, and eye color, and skin color, and language, and nationality, and one of my biggest pet peeves. I get to air one of my biggest pet peeves. People say, "Well, what race are you?" Well, there's only one race. There's only one race. There's different nationalities, but there's only one race. We're one. Just as God is one, God and Jesus Christ, when Jesus prayed, he prayed about he and the Father being one, and he wants us to be one, just as they are one. That's what he wants for mankind. And so we got to get over these thoughts and these ideas that anyone is better just simply because of the place they were born, the color of their skin, the color of their eyes, the language that they speak, whatever it may be. That's what was troubling the Greeks. And Paul points out and he says, look, we're all one. Everybody's created from one. And God is the one who created. So we go on. We go on. And when Paul was confronting their beliefs, this is the same thing that Jesus did. In Matthew chapter 5, Matthew chapter 23, as Jesus is preaching the Sermon on the Mount, he's confronting the very beliefs, the everyday beliefs of the Jews, as they were told by their religious teachers of the day, their rabbis of the day. Jesus said, "You have heard, but I say. You have heard, but I say." In Matthew chapter 23, he castigates the scribes and Pharisees for the things that they were teaching, the things that they were binding, and yet they didn't do any of these things themselves. And sometimes religious thought needs to be confronted. We need to have the strength and the courage to confront religious error and stand up for the things of the gospel. We go back and we look at Acts chapter 17, and Paul points out that God has no limitations. In Acts chapter 17, Paul writes there, "Since he is Lord of heaven and earth and does not dwell in temples made with hands, he is not worshipped, nor is he worshipped with men's hands, as though he needed anything, since he gives to all life, breath, and all things." He talks about the omnipotence of God. God doesn't need this building that you built him. God doesn't need all of the things that you're doing for you to worship Him. He gave all of these things to you. He created all of these things. He gave you the mind to construct and build all of these things. We look over at John chapter 4. John chapter 4. This is similar to what Jesus told the woman at Jacob's well, the Samaritan woman at Jacob's well. Remember, Jesus is talking about getting a drink of water here, and the Samaritan woman is astonished because a Jew was asking a Gentile, a Samaritan, to give him water. And Jesus says in verse 21, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship we know what we worship, for salvations of the Jews. But the hour is coming, and now is, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such to worship Him. God is spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and truth." You see, Paul says, these grand places that you built, this grand temple to Athena that you built, God doesn't need that. He's not. He doesn't need anything that's made with the mind, the thought, the ideas of man. Because true worshipers are going to worship in spirit and in truth, not centered in a particular city, particular place. But we're going to worship God in spirit and in truth. Acts chapter 17, as we just read, God is the Lord of heaven and earth. Greeks had made so many gods. They had made gods to cover both heaven and earth, and the seas, and the ethereal realm, and all kinds of different things. All the vast number of gods. And Paul is pointing out that there's simply one God, one Lord and God. And we preach the same thing. Paul points out the differences between the one true God and all of the number of idols that they worship. Today, in some ways, idolatry has re-entered the religions of man. We're not going to talk about Hinduism. We're not going to talk about other Oriental religions, Shintoism or anything like that, where they do worship idols. We're not going to talk about Catholicism. I'm not going to talk about these things. We're going to talk about, for just a brief minute, the idolatry that seems to have re-entered into those people who call themselves Christians. They have they worship in the religions that are constructed by man, and a type of idolatry has re-entered into their worship today. There are some religious groups that have idols. But that's not under consideration. We talked about that. There's a practice of a form of idolatry. Well, how do they do this? Well, they do this in the method of worship that is offered. It's a form of idolatry as they're doing this. The religious practice of many insists on instrumental music. They do that. They want the instruments. They want the band. They want the something going on, and they have they've incorporated into it a form of light shows and concert type atmosphere. It may be just a simple guy playing on an acoustic guitar, but this has become a form of idolatry because so many people are insisting on this more and more. This is what we need in order to worship God. We need this type of thing. It's invaded the thoughts and the ideas. The people profess their adoration for the music that is played, the bands in general. Oh, it was so great. You should have heard the band today. Oh, it was just so. We've seen people idolize music makers of the secular realm. It's getting to be the same way in some aspects in the religious realm. People idolize that. The players themselves, they profess their talents and their abilities are from God, and they say, well, God would want me to use these for worship to Him. Well, they're almost almost setting up God as even the idol that they're worshiping by playing the thing that they said God gave them the talent to do. It's a strange thought. It's a strange idea as they insist upon these things. Many religious groups, many traditional religious groups have gone to traditional worship services and contemporary worship services. Why is that? Well, it's a draw. Draw people in with what? With the music that they adore, with the music that they idolize. Well, the music will bring them in. We'll do it this way. We'll get a little country in it. We'll get a little rock and roll in it. We'll get a little of this in it, a little of that in it, and it'll bring them in. And it's making an idol of the music in order to serve God. It's sad how idolatry creeps in when men think they're trying to serve God. In Acts chapter 17, verse 25, verse 25, nor does he worship with men's hands as though he needed anything, since he gives life to all, breath and all things. God is not worshipped with men's hands. Now, I'm going to take the very, very literal approach to this. It takes our hands to play the musical instruments. We make the tune, we make the sound, we make the beat, we fashion everything with our hands in this, and God doesn't need that. God doesn't need our hands to create the music, the beat, the cadence, the tempo, the melody. God doesn't need any of those things. And yet this is what is idolized and practiced today. We look over at Ephesians. Turn over to Ephesians. I love it when Aaron gets out of the book, then I go back to it. Ephesians 5 and verse 19. Ephesians 5 and verse 19. Speaking to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord. Is the beat made with the hands? Is the melody made with the hands? I know I'm taking a very, very literal approach to this. But God doesn't need that. Why? Because God wants us to sing with our heart. With the spiritual heart. We're thinking and considering the words that we're singing. The melody is built up in our heart. It's brought out in our heart. As we're thinking about the words and how they relate to God. God doesn't need us to bang a drum. God doesn't need us to pluck an instrument, because the instrument that we're supposed to be plucking is the spiritual heart of man. God is not worshipped with hands. And so many people today idolize. Oh, did you hear the guitar solo today? Oh, the things that he can do. Oh, he can just pick that guitar. Oh, it's just wonderful. And idolatry has been established. The Greeks, the idol worshippers in general, had feasts and banquets as part of their religious practices. We go back and we look at Exodus chapter 32. Exodus chapter 32. And we read what happened when the children of Israel turned over to idolatry. Exodus chapter 32. They're at Mount Sinai. Moses has been on the mountain for some time. So when Aaron saw, verse 5, so when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it. He saw the attitude of the children. He received the gold from their hands in verse 4. He fashioned it in verse 4 into a molded calf. He made this calf, and he said in verse 4, "This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt." So when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it. So he made the idol, he made the altar, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord." Then they rose early on the next day, offered burnt offerings, and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. There was this huge feast that's proclaimed as worship to God. This is what we're going to do. We're going to worship God in this manner. In Numbers chapter 25 and verse 2, Numbers chapter 25 and verse 2, as we're talking about the Israelites again, as they're wandering through the wilderness, and they are caused to play the harlot here. Numbers 25. Now Israel remained in Acacia Grove, and the people began to commit harlotry with the women of Moab. They invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. We see again this harlotry, this idolatry is played, and what's included in this is this feasting, this eating, and they bowed down and worshiped and rose up to play again. All of this in the name of worship, in the name of idolatrous practices. And you go back in secular history, and you read about the various idolatry that was common to Athena, to whatever god or goddess there was, and all kinds of feasts and banquets and parades and all kinds of stuff. All kinds of stuff. Prostitutions. These were practiced regularly as worship and service to God or to their gods. Idolatry. This is what you had to do. This is the way you had to do it. And well, it's even come full scale. All of these have become a type of idolatry. The people begin to think that this is a way to worship and serve God. Hold it just a second here. Something didn't click here. Let's see. The religions of today, there we go, okay. The religions of today, they have breakfasts and dinners for their congregants and the community. They proclaim that this is the way we're going to serve God. We're going to have fellowship, and we're going to bring people together to serve God. In a type of, this is not an exact, but it's a type of idolatry, because this is the way we do it. We have a feast and we bring people in. We have a dinner and we bring people in. We have a breakfast and we bring people in. Additionally, they have their community projects, both local and far away. This is what we're going to do for the community. It's a good thing. It's a good work to do for the community. Well, it's become a type of idolatry, that the only way to serve God is to gather together in this fashion so that we can go out and help the community. Why can't you just individually go out and help the community? There was a big effort done not too long ago in Toler, and a local religious group. We're going to go up and we're going to go as a group. We're going to get together and we're going to fan out and we're going to clean up Toler. We're going to do these various projects. And well, why do you have to have a religious body to do it? Why don't you just do it as a work of yourself? But no, you have to label it as a work of your religious group, your religious body. And what you're doing is you're turning this into a form of idolatrous practice. That this is the way we do things in order to serve God. They have pageants and plays and dramas and skits and other performances in and as worship. And as they do these things, they have to plan and promote and produce, and people begin to think that this is a way of worship and service to God. Remember what Jesus said? Worship in spirit and in truth. It's not the big production. It's not the grand scene. It's simple worship to God in spirit and in truth. And when we start doing things according to the ideas and the minds of man, then all of a sudden we begin to think that these things are necessary, and the only way to do it is by these things. Thus we set these things up on the pedestal, and it becomes the idol that we worship in order to serve God, and we're basically turning God into an idol himself. They plan, produce, audition, rehearse for these events. A lot of money, a lot of time is spent on these events. Worship and service to God has become a spectacle made out of the minds of man and made with the hands of man. It's not that far from the parades, the feasts, the banquets, all those things that were practiced in idolatry in Athens. in the first century. It's not that far. And yet that's what people do. Proclaiming to worship God. We have to have the same courage that Paul had. Stand up. This is worship to God. This is what God has proclaimed. As we're talking about authority in the adult Bible class, we have to be able to explain authority and what is allowed and what is not allowed. What is authorized by God and what is not authorized by God. We have to remember that worship to God is not a spectacle. It's not made out of the imagination of the mind of man. This type of worship appeals to that imagination. This type of worship appeals to the physical nature of man. It's earthly. Man wants to see and touch and taste. And remember, worship to God is in spirit and in truth. The instrument that we pluck is our heart, our spiritual heart. As we think about these songs, as we sing these songs, as we partake of the Lord's Supper, as we offer our prayers to God, as we sit down to study God's Word together. It's not a production. It's worship to the one true God, the one who created all things. It's not very far from the idolatry that was practiced in the ancient world. We must remember that worship and service to God is not a spectacle to be seen. John 4:24, worship God in spirit and in truth. Turn over to Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6. In Matthew chapter 6, beginning in verse 1. Matthew chapter 6, and beginning in verse 1. Jesus says, "Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men to be seen by them. Otherwise you have no reward from your Father in heaven. Therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. Surely I say to you, they have their reward. But when you do a charitable deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your charitable deed may be seen in in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will himself reward you openly." You see, the religions of man, they want to do their charitable deeds so that everybody can see them. And there's an idolization, there's a setting up. Look what they did. And this is the only way that we can do it from this point forward. And there's an idolization that begins to happen. There's idolatry that begins to happen. God says, just do it. You don't have to make a big production of it. Just do it. Go help. You know what you need to do. Go do it. Don't sound the trumpet. Don't raise your arms, make a big scene about it. Just do it. Verse 5. "And when you pray, you shall not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the corners of the streets, they may be seen by men. Assuredly I say to you, they have their reward. But you, when you pray, go into your room, and when you have shut your door, pray to your Father who is in the secret place, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. And when you pray, do not use vain repetitions as the heathen, for they think that they will be heard for their many words. Therefore, do not be like them, for your Father knows the things you have need of before you ask of him." There's nothing wrong with saying a prayer in public. Nothing wrong with that. There is something wrong with saying a prayer in public as to be a spectacle, as to make a spectacle of it. That makes it a form of spectator service. We want to see what he has to say. Nowadays, we want to see what she has to say. See what they have to say. And it's a spectator sport. It becomes an idol. Because it's planned year after year. Oh, you're going to go down and pray this year? You're going to go down and pray this year? What are you going to do this year? And sometimes, not all the times, the prayers get longer and more grandiose. And God says, don't make it a spectacle. There are public prayers, without a doubt. There is never a time when you can't make a public prayer. A public prayer is always a good thing. But we're not going to make a spectacle of it. We're not going to make it some grand thing to draw attention. And that's what it seems that at times so many of man's religions can do. So we're going to offer our prayers. We're going to understand the situation and offer the appropriate prayers for the situation. And we're not going to be verbose. Use a bunch of words. Because it's not about me. It's not about the one who's praying. It's about directing people's minds in prayer to God.
Amen.
And it seems in many cases that the religions of man want to do something different, want to make this a spectacle. Worship to God is in spirit and in truth. Ephesians 5:19 our songs are from our heart. We make the melody in our heart. It's a spiritual thing. That's what our service to God is. Philippians 2 and verse 7. Philippians 2 and in verse 7. Paul writes there, and he says, but made himself, the speaking of Christ, made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant, and coming in the likeness of men. Christ humbled himself. And so often, when the religious world does something, they say it's a humility that brings them here today, but the spectacle itself is not humble. It's not humble because it's spectacle. It has become something great and grand when we're supposed to humble ourselves in our service to God. It's not seeking a place among men. In Luke chapter 14, Jesus uses this very example. In Luke chapter 14, and beginning in verse 8, when you're invited when you are invited to by anyone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in the best place, lest one more honorable than you be invited by him. And he who invited you, and come and say to you, give place to this man, and then you begin with shame to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down in the lowest place, so that when you are invited, then he who invited you comes, he may say to you, friend, go up higher. Then you will have glory in the presence of those who sit at the table with you. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Unfortunately, it seems that this is, at times, it's turned around in the religions of man. They want to exalt themselves. They want to exalt their practices, their works, the things that they do. And we should be humble in our service to God. Humble in our service to man. Because it's God who gets the glory over all things. We must remember that God is not an idol. He's not worshipped and served in the manner of idolatry. He sees our motives. He sees our purposes. He sees the way we purpose our heart. And we need to worship God in spirit and in truth. Not with the ideas of man, not with the ways of man, but simply with the authorized way that God would have us worship Him. We must remember the rebuke from Samuel to King Saul. In 1 Samuel chapter 15, 1 Samuel chapter 15 and verse 22, Samuel said to Saul, as the Lord has great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord. Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed than the fat of the rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornnness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, He has rejected you from being king. Remember, He was supposed to go and utterly wipe out everything. He heeded the voice of the people, He says, brought back the king, brought back the fattest, so that they could offer them to God in a form of idolatrous practice. This is what we're going to do. They set this up. Saul set this up. And Samuel says, it was better to obey than sacrifice and burnt offering. That would have been the sacrifice. But no, you wanted to set up and establish something else. And this is what man does today. We've got to be careful that we don't approve of this, that we don't condone this, that we don't begin to practice these types of things ourselves. Because it's so easy to fall into the trap of idolatry, as we're simply striving to worship God in spirit and in truth, knowing and understanding what He authorizes, what He has established, and that's the way I'm going to worship God. So what do? We offer our prayers to God. In our public worship, we offer our prayers to God. We give of our means. We remember our Lord's perfect sacrifice. We study His Word together. And we sing songs. While these things are done in a physical manner, all of them are should most definitely be done in the Spirit and in truth. Thinking about and considering each thing that we do and how it relates to God, who is Spirit, as we simply seek to serve Him according to His pattern. We cannot think that our worship and service to God is determined by what we think is right or will be accepted. We must obey God. Simple and straightforward. We must obey God. So we look at ourselves. Are we striving for that? Or are we setting up and establishing some idolatrous practice ourselves? Maybe there's some idolatrous thing that's in our lives that's prohibiting us from being that example to the world that we ought to be. That's when we take a good hard long look at self. We strive to criticize and rebuke self and make the changes that are necessary. So that as we teach the world, as we talk to the world about the gospel of Jesus Christ, they will not see any hypocrisy in us. What they'll see is someone who makes a mistake from time to time, but that same person strives to correct the mistake. Yeah, I was wrong in this. Sorry about that. I hope you'll forgive me. I'm trying to correct that. We do that with one another. We forgive one another. And then we do that, and we also do that towards God. We recognize that when we sin against God, we strive to turn back to God, repent of these things, make ourselves right with Him. Yes, I sinned against you and you alone. That's what Christians do. If you're here this morning as a Christian, you recognize that your life isn't as it should be, make the corrections. And if you need the prayers of the congregation, let us know. We'll pray with you and pray for you. If you're here this morning as one who recognizes that you need to be baptized into Jesus Christ, this lesson wasn't about baptism, wasn't about obeying the gospel. It was about obeying God in our worship. But obeying God in worship begins by obeying the gospel of Jesus Christ. He that believes and is baptized shall be saved. He who does not believe will be condemned. The life of a Christian begins at the point of baptism. If you know you need to be baptized into Jesus Christ, everything is ready. We would encourage you to do that today. If you have any spiritual need, we would be encouraged if you would let us help, if you would come forward through standing and sing the song that's been selected.